Trump's tariffs. The EU played hard. The UK played nice. Who won this round? Welcome to Bridge the Channel. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bridge the Channel, brought to you by the Martin Center. Since our last episode, Donald Trump has managed to both start and end, or at least postpone, a global trade war with his famous Liberation Day, an announcement of tariffs around the world, which he postponed a few days later. What have been the differences in how the UK and the EU have tackled this new global trade crisis? And are the Trump tariffs going to bring them closer together or drive them further apart? On the one hand, we have had the EU, which has pretty much been in the spirit of retaliation. From the very beginning, the EU announced that it had in place retaliatory measures that would hurt directly the United States economy. On the other hand, of course, the UK from the beginning showed a complete willingness to work with the White House. It saw the announcement of tariffs as a way to further intensify its contacts with the United States and try to push forward with its plan for a UK-US free trade agreement at some point in the future. Now, of course, we can put this down onto various factors. First of all is the question of size. The UK operating alone in the as a trade actor knows that it cannot hurt the US as much as the EU can, and initially at least it was also a factor of the fact that the EU was hit by much higher tariffs than the UK. Remember, initially the UK was one of the few actors who got hit with a baseline 10% tariff, which led many old supporters of Brexit to suddenly reappear and speak about a Brexit dividend. The UK being a small and agile and liberal actor, being able to navigate the global economy to its benefit without being bogged down by Brussels and the EU. Of course, a few days later, all of this came tumbling down when Donald Trump announced a postponement of all tariffs apart from the baseline 10% rate, which meant that suddenly the UK was no longer a special partner, but just one among many countries being hit by tariffs by the US. In the Donald Trump world, there are no special relationships. So what does this all mean for the EU-UK relationship? There's an argument to be made that the Trump tariffs are yet another crisis that shows that the two sides will inevitably need to work closer together in a world that is much more crisis-ridden and much more fragmented, much like developments in the Russia-Ukraine war have shown in the field of defense and security. However, I feel that the reality is quite more complicated in the economic area, and this actually goes back to Brexit. Defense and security was always an area where even arch Brexiteers from back in the day always accepted that the UK may have to work with the EU if it was in its national interest. However, trade has always been emblematic of the so-called benefits of Brexit, of the UK's ability to strike its own trade deals around the world and pursue its own economic interests free from the regulations of Brussels and the EU. Now, one thing that we know about Keir Starmer and his domestic political strategy is that he always tries to avoid to reopen any Brexit debates, any Brexit wounds. For this reason, while I expect both sides to present themselves as being on the same kind of liberal, rules-based international economic system, I actually expect them to be much more competitive towards each other when it comes to the economy, when it comes to trade, and most importantly, in trying each side to strike the best partnership possible for itself with Donald Trump. Right now, it's very difficult to say what all of this means, simply because it is very difficult to predict what Donald Trump will do next. One thing certain is that his actions create new frictions in the global economy. We simply have to wait and see, as now negotiations are ongoing and everybody tries to make sense of the actions of Donald Trump. It's going to be a very interesting coming weeks and months on the international economic field, and of course we're going to be here to analyze all of this for you. Until next time, take care.